Well, the media and progressives bang on all day about mental health awareness and cyberbullying, while literally cyberbullying people on the internet if they're on the political right. We saw a case with Jordan Peterson yesterday. He appeared in a news interview, obviously very upset. He was crying. He's been through a lot of personal turmoil over the last few months with his wife nearly dying. He cries during an interview, and he wasn't like roaring crying. He just had tears rolling down his cheeks. And they absolutely crucified him. It's like Laura was saying in the previous segment, anyone who betrays any emotional vulnerability on the right is immediately viciously mob attacked by the same people who virtue signal all day about how much they care about mental health awareness. Unless you have a different opinion to them politically, then they will viciously attack you like nothing else. So we've got this entire narrative about people need to talk about their feelings more. When anyone does on the right, they're crucified. But again, they say there's a stigma around talking about depression. There is no stigma talking about it so long as you separate it from politics, and suddenly there is for some reason. But what they're not talking about is social media and what impact social media addiction has on mental health and depression. And that is studied, that is considered in this article out of the Daily Caller, which is also up on Infowars.com. Experts explain possible reasons behind a 56% jump in youth suicide rate in 10 years. Listen to these stats. The national youth suicide rate in the US has increased 56% in 10 years, according to data from the CDC. This is from 2007 to 2017, just by coincidence, the same time period when social media skyrocketed, social media use skyrocketed. The suicide rate among young people ages 10 to 24 increased from 6.8 per 100,000 people in 2007 to 10.6 per 100,000 people in 2017. Get this, among youth ages 10 to 14, the suicide rate nearly tripled from 2007 to 2017. For all age groups between 10 and 24 years old, studied by the CDC, suicide rates surpassed homicide rates from 2011 to 2017, the report notes. Additionally, the suicide rate in the US in general has increased 30%. The chances of a person in this age range dying by suicide is greater than homicide when it used to be the reverse. They talk about antidepressant use in this article, but they also talk about social media. It's a long article. I'm not going to go through it all. But they make the point that a Pew Research Center study found 86% of adults between the ages of 18 and 24 use some form of social media. 95% of children ages 13 through 17 have a smartphone. So that boom started after Facebook was invented in 2004. And then, of course, you had Twitter, you had Instagram after that. Just 3 years before the beginning of the CDC study. The same year the first iPhone was released and the FDA applied the black box label to antidepressant medications for children. Now, this is what an expert says. Certainly the timing is impressive. The invention of the iPhone, Facebook, and the withdrawal of antidepressants as a mainstream intervention by pediatricians, these are all correlations. Another expert said, I think we're going to reflect on this time and think, what were we thinking when a child between the ages of 6 and 16 has a computer powerful enough to run a small country? They can end up with serious issues. And again, it goes back to this point. If you're a naturally lonely person who feels ostracized, atomized by society, and you're sat there on your computer, on Facebook, on Snapchat, on Instagram, seeing what all your contemporaries, what your peers are doing, seeing that they're all having fun, they're all at the parties, that is only going to drag you down further. There is a direct correlation between social media use, social media addiction, and depression, and eventually suicide, because again, people are seeing the feeds, the social media feeds of their friends and of their acquaintances, and not realizing that it's a highlights reel, and in many cases it's manipulated. They're not having extravagant fun lives. They're just having these individual moments which seem like it's their entire existence when it's not. In many cases, the same people posting those images, those videos, are just as lonely as the other people sitting at home viewing them and wondering why they didn't get invited to the party. So it's all a massive negative feedback loop. The media will not talk about this connection to any great degree. They'll only talk about other factors which may or may not even be as directly related. Because again, as Laura was saying in the interview, most of these leftists, these progressives, live on Twitter, and they do not want to see it condemned or criticized in any way. That is a long article, but it's really worth a read about the 56% jump in youth suicide rate in 10 years. It's up on Infowars.com. Meanwhile, Justin Trudeau, Canada's first black president, wants to censor the internet if he wins re-election, which of course he did last night, not with a majority government, with a minority government, but he's still back in power. That's right, the world's #1 blackface enthusiast will decide what constitutes, quote, harmful content in a bid to tackle online hate and disinformation. Unless it's hatred against Jordan Peterson for crying in a video, then it's perfectly fine. So they were asked a question, Trudeau's Liberal Party, which is now back in power. Does your party support the development of a national strategy to combat online hate and disinformation? They said, yes, they will start fining social media companies if they don't remove, quote, hate speech within 24 hours. They don't do that, they will face massive financial penalties. As I point out in this article, according to progressives, hate speech is anything that contradicts their dogma. Giving Trudeau the power to censor such content is a trapdoor to the widespread evisceration of free speech online. Mark Steyn said, ultimately, free speech is hate speech and hate speech is free speech. It's for the speech you hate, the speech you revile. And that is the exact point. If you don't defend the speech of the most vile people imaginable, you don't defend free speech at all. He continues, the alternative to free speech is approved speech, and that necessarily means approved by whom? Well, in this case, it is the world's #1 blackface enthusiast, Justin Trudeau. He is going to decide what is hateful, at least in Canada. Meanwhile, on the subject of free speech, Nick Cave slams woke culture as an assault on free speech. This is the music icon Nick Cave, who has slammed woke culture as an assault on free speech, asserting that it's self-righteous and inflicts suppression on contrary systems of thought. So yet again, this is another successful, famous celebrity. The only ones who speak out, the only ones who are immune to cancel culture are the people who have already had their success, the people who are so big, so revered, so well loved that they can't be toppled by cancel culture. They feel free to speak out. Isn't the case, of course, for the vast majority of celebrities who are coming up and are absolutely petrified of offending woke mobs who then get them cancelled on the internet for transgressing the boundaries of political correctness. Nick Cave said, quote, some of us are of the generation that believed that free speech was a clear-cut and uncontested virtue, yet within a generation this concept is seen by many as a dog whistle to the far right and is rapidly being consigned to the left's ever-expanding ideological junk pile. He also made some other comments in that article, which I encourage you to read. Meanwhile, Kanye West says rap is the devil's music. Of course, Kanye West recently converted to Christianity. He told his pastor, Adam Tyson, that he wasn't going to rap anymore because, quote, according to the pastor, Kanye told him that's the devil's music. He then convinced him that he could use his talents for God. He could rap for God instead. Yeezy also confided in him that the fame had exacerbated his problems with sinful behavior. He said, quote, the guilt of sin brought him down low. He would say the devil basically brought him to a place where he just felt like he was in bondage to his sin. So he said, I got delivered. Is there any reason why they hate Kanye West so much? Chinese Communist Party says criticizing LeBron James is racist. You knew that was going to happen. Of course, he denounced Houston Rockets general manager Daryl Morey for daring to tweet his support for the Hong Kong protesters. LeBron James basically came back and said there were consequences, there were ramifications for that kind of free speech. Of course, upsetting or refusing to upset his Chinese paymasters. You know, LeBron James will come out with tweet after tweet about injustice and about how important free speech was during the civil rights era. But when it comes to free speech that upsets his communist paymasters, then he'll come down on you like a ton of bricks. So they had a China Daily Communist Mouthpiece newspaper that wrote an editorial saying that LeBron James's detractors were using, quote, nasty racial connotations to attack him. Yes, this is one of the biggest human rights abusers on the planet, a country that literally puts Muslims in concentration camps, lecturing people on being bigoted and racist. Incredible. Infowars.com will be back in the next segment. Don't go away.